just call our old pal Dave Shiner, who's been running all around grapefruit and cactus, and one of my favorite people. And even though it says Washington Post on the title, he lives here in Baltimore, hon. How about that Alex Cobb, Dave Shiner, huh?
I was a little surprised. I was surprised at the team that signed him. I was surprised at the number when I saw the contract figures. It was a bit of a surprise all around. I mean, to me, the Orioles in this age of tanking, are the perfect candidate for a really well done tank job, and yet they're out there spending money, really the type of dollars that very few teams were spending this winter. So it's a strange kind of signing, but I can't say I hate it because I like to see a competitive team here, and I think that's what they are again. And let's just see what happens.
Dave, your credentials are impeccable with me. My audience may or may not be completely, familiar with your years on the baseball beat and off the beat
Right.
and the Olympics and the Redskins and RGD. You did a lot of different stuff, but you're sort of back on baseball again after, what, decade and a half maybe you were gone?
No. I was really only gone for about 5 years.
Okay, it felt like you were gone maybe gone from the Orioles, right? Because once the Nationals happened, it feels like everybody in Washington. Boswell's been gone from Baltimore and the Orioles for 15 years because you guys.
That is correct.
Yeah, and the Orioles stunk. So, but let me say this: you're back on the beat on a national and a global scale here. When you look at this offseason, this has been fascinating, and fascinating that the Orioles could get Cashner and could get Cobb at these numbers, because this time last year, if you would have said, well, they can get Cobb for 4 years and 57, he'll be healthy, he'll come back from Tommy John. Are you interested? I don't know that the Orioles weren't players financially, but certainly this letting kids in for free and the whole notion of giving a pitcher $57 million in March smacks of Peter Angelos not being in charge anymore,
Yeah, I think that might be fair to say. We always heard that they were never going to go beyond 3 years again after the Ubaldo Jimenez disaster. And, of course, they just did that. They exceeded the Jimenez contract, in fact, with this one. It was a strange signing because in this winter, a lot of great pitchers, a lot of very good pitchers, a lot of very good players in general got well below market value. They got actually well below even, some of the offers that they got from their own teams. So, to see the Orioles go that far for a guy like Cobb was a bit of a surprise. And to me, it kind of ruined the whole strategy of waiting out the market and trying to get bargains. They didn't really get a bargain here. The guy who won was Alex Cobb by waiting out this long and getting that much money from the Orioles, when a guy like Lance Lynn, who frankly, was very comparable, maybe even better track record than Alex Cobb, got the 1 year contract from the Twins. So to see them go 4 years was very strange.
Yeah, all of it, man. Like, the word that Brady Anderson's running the place, that Duquette's going to be ducking out of here soon, kind of the way Gillick didn't do a whole lot his last year around here under contract, whether there's going to be a kumbaya with Buck and Dan, knowing that, and Dave, this is monumental, man. You've been covering this 25 years. I've been covering this 25 years. If the old man is never to be heard from again and will never, ever make a decision again, and I'm starting to believe that that is the case, right, with letting kids in for free and giving pitchers 50 stuff that's just way outside of what Peter would have ever have done in any sort of lucid state. And that John, and you remember the first time around with John because you were covering the team then, John was the rotisserie guy, right? Someone has to be running the place. The word to me is that Mom, it's Mom's team, and Mom's the worker, and Mom's the one that's there every day working. I don't know that she's making baseball decisions or qualified to do such, or how that would work for an 80-something-year-old woman as well. But the times they are changing here, Dave. I mean, fire up the popcorn for anybody that can really report upon what's really happening, not what Rock Kabakko's allowed to report.
Well, look, I'll say this. This has the feeling of a massive transitional year for this franchise. all the way from the product on the field, which is to say Manny Machado's last year at Camden Yards. I mean, I don't think anyone believes there's any chance the Orioles are going to keep him. And then there's Adam Jones and Zach Britton and Ben Brock. But, I mean, this is the Machado era, and is very likely coming to an end at the end of this season. So beyond that, you've got obviously the manager and the general manager who are lame ducks this season, and you've got this question about ownership. So honestly, for as long as I have been around the Orioles, which goes back to '99, was my first year on the beat. Other than Cal retiring in '01, I mean, this feels like as monumental a transition year as that one did, and nothing else really comes close.
Well, and then it's how to do it right. Like, to your point, was tanking the strategy and dealing off Britton, because we know they were dealing off Britton 2 different times. Machado, they at least kicked that down the curb a little bit. Who knows whether that was ever really going to happen. We all sort of know Duquette doesn't want to be here and hasn't wanted to be here. They've completely screwed up the international market, right? Like, they've not even played in the international market, like it doesn't exist or something. And then there's just the malaise of the fan base, and where the Yankees are, and where the Red Sox are, and where they're positioned, where Jones is and Brock is, and in all of this, it felt very little like they had any strategy. And even this Cobb thing feels like the wind blew in that direction, much like Cashner, that if you're going to stink, go stink. Let's get some draft picks. Let's, reboot here. Let's take some money. It doesn't feel like whatever they sit around and decide in early November, if they decide anything at all, that the place doesn't run like a functional place ever, does it? I mean, really, where there's like a real strategy and they're like, this is what we're doing, here is the blueprint, this is the way we're going to go. It feels like this is the result of that. When a pitcher goes on sale and you get him in the blue light, right, late, you go and sign him because he's willing to come here, because over 25 years since Camden Yards, Dave, getting any pitcher that wants to sign up here, who's a good pitcher, has been very, very difficult to do at any price.
Right. I mean, the one thing I will say about any semblance of a plan around here is that they have been adamant that they're not interested in a full-on tank job. They've always said, we're going to put a competitive product on the field, and part of you has to applaud that. I mean, these are very tough times right now in places like, just to name a few, Cincinnati and Miami. And I mean, there's a dozen places right now that are in the middle of tank jobs. So,
Philadelphia's been awful. Atlanta's been awful. I mean, there's a lot of places where right now, Tampa, I mean, you've been around to these camps. I don't know how you go into the Atlanta Braves camp and sell me that they're going to be a competitive baseball team this year.
Well, no, but I think you also have smart fans now who are well-read on FanGraphs and Baseball Prospectus, and they know prospects. And you can sell a tank job to a fan base now, whereas maybe 15 or 20 years ago you couldn't. I think fans, especially even in Baltimore, especially. I mean, this is a great baseball market. I think fans here could get on board with a tank job that is going to result 3 to 4 years from now in the blossoming. Like Philadelphia. I was in their camp a few days ago. I mean, they've turned the corner. I mean, they lost 96 games last year, but there's a feeling there that they turned a corner and they're going to build it back up now. They signed Arrieta. This may not be their year in 2018, but 2019, the Chicago White Sox are the same way. The Braves are the same way. People can get behind a tank job if it's done well.
Well, I mean, even the Yankees a year and a half ago, and I mean, you're a frequent enough guest around here, especially in baseball season. I don't even know if you were on the Yankees beat a year and a half ago, but everybody I talked to for a month, it was all about, oh my God, the Yankees are going to sell, like unprecedented, never heard from before. And now, not only did that sell work out a year and a half later, and they're a playoff team last year, they're the favorite now. And they're the team everybody expects everything from. And they went all in on Stanton. And they'll probably go all in on Harper and or Machado at the end of the year one way or another. But refrain from Arrieta and refrain from Alex Cobb. The Yankees could have used Alex Cobb. And the Yankees could have afforded Alex Cobb, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the Yankees, it's almost silly to compare the Yankees situation to the Orioles because or any team, because even when the Yankees were quote unquote downsizing a couple years back when they traded Andrew Miller and they traded they traded Chapman and they never got their payroll below, like, let's say $180 million. I mean, they were still spending big money. A lot of it was sunk money, but regardless of that, I mean, the Orioles are in a position in this division, like you said. The Yankees are look like a world beater. The Red Sox are two-time division champs, and they signed J.D. Martinez. The Orioles, of all teams in baseball, would be well served by a tank job, and I advocated for that last summer. I said trade Machado, trade Britton, trade anybody who has any value, while a contender can get them for 2 stretch runs instead of 1. And you can rebuild this thing in 2 to 3 years. It doesn't have to be a 5-year plan. You could have gotten so much back for those guys.
And by the way, whoever those names are, whatever the Moncadas and those names would have been, if that's where we're sitting right now, right, like where there is no Machado, he's gone. There is no Britton, he's not hurt. He's pitching in St. Louis or Cleveland, and we have 3 of their prospects. And 2 or 3 of those guys are fringy right now, and the games are on Masson down in spring training, and we're watching a bunch of 23-year-olds run around. You know, the 4 or 5 names we've brought in through this, deft dealing over the last 18 months, which probably should have begun at the Washington, baseball meetings a year and a half ago, right? Like where that could have been the time that Machado and Britton and these guys, that you would be looking at a different kind of program right now and a different kind of deal. I don't know that Buck would have wanted that, to sign up for young guys. I don't know that Duquette would have wanted to sign up for that. And I don't know that Angelos even would have understood that or signed off on that or whatever. But that's what other organizations would have done a year and a half ago. They didn't. So now we go further down the yellow brick road of the coulda, woulda, shoulda, whatever, and Alex Cobb's got $57 million. Seems like a nice guy, by the way, Alex Cobb, doesn't he?
Well, look, nobody wants to do it that way. I mean, fans don't want to do it that way. GMs don't want to do it that way. But, sometimes in baseball, that is the best path out. And, I mean, I think you've seen that. I mean, you saw the Houston Astros and the Chicago Cubs win back-to-back World Series after massive tank jobs where they lost 100 games or 90-plus games for multiple years in a row. I'm not saying that would have worked in Baltimore, because you also have to have the smart people behind the scenes making those trades and getting the right process. Because if you're going to do this, you had darn well better do it right. You don't want to be stuck with a situation like you remember the Orioles tear down in 2000 and I believe it was 2000. Remember that, Nestor?
Was that the Luis Matos era, right? He was going to be the next star.
They traded Surhoff, Charles Johnson, Baines, Will Clark, a couple,
and they got Melvin Mora is all they got back.
They got back Melvin Mora and a bunch of nothing. So that's the danger in doing the teardown, is that you get it wrong and you're sunk now for years and years. So I'm not necessarily saying the Orioles should have done it, but of all the teams in baseball, they probably had the most motivation to do it.
Dave Sheinin is our guest. He is one of my all-time favorites at the Washington Post. He covers Major League Baseball. I'm probably looking to poke around about the Orioles, and he's been poking around 20 different camps out in Arizona and down in Florida, as well as we get you ready for opening day around here. All of our opening day and baseball and NFL owners meetings coverage brought to you by Howard Bank, a relentless commitment to being the best at everything they do, branches throughout Baltimore and Maryland, and also sponsoring our charity and community series, which begins next Thursday on the 5th of April. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. There's one right around the corner from Dave's house, too, down there in Fells Point. Tasty coffee. I have the Kona blend here in my Cole Roofing mug right now, but get the app, download the app, pump the gas, get the chicken and the Western fries on the house. That's the best way to do it. Also, I got to tell you about our friends at Fremont Mortgage who are doing our head coach Barry Trotz's event with us, as well as Cole Roofing. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. You need Fremont Mortgage. They are sponsoring our swabbing for There Goes My Hero and for the Bone Marrow Registry Thursday night at Michael's Cafe in Timonium. Come on out, get a little split-level soup, get yourself a crab cake, get a prime steak. I'm going to be telling Mike Flanagan stories because Mike and I had a very famous evening there one night. I told Frankovic I'm going to tell him that story with Barry Trotz. But it's Thursday night. It's the opening day after party. It is at Michael's Cafe in Timonium. We'll be swabbing with head coach Barry Trotz. You believe in the Caps shining this year? Come on now.
In the Caps?
Come on. This is the year.
Dude, how many years have you said that?
I know. Let's go back to baseball, man. I mean, we're one headache at a time here, you know.
Yeah,
Where are
right.
you on Brady Anderson running the organization? I affectionately refer to him as Brady Angelos. But, Dave, the notion that dealing away Machado, Britt, and all those things that an organization would have wanted to have done 18 months ago or even 4 months ago, Duquette's the guy running the place who doesn't want to be running the place, who had one foot out the door and is kind of, sort of perpetually disgruntled here. I mean, I don't know who I want to trust to make those decisions, to your point. Sid Thrift was the one that got us into, with the Confederate money, got us into that trouble back in the day. But this time around, who's making those decisions? In Philadelphia, when it's, when it's Pat Gillick or, Andy McPhail, you sort of feel good about it and wait it out. When it's somewhere else and somebody else, and in the era of analytics and we're trying to analyze A-ball pitchers who are 19 in relationship to deals here. I mean, is Brady Anderson going to be running this place as you see it? Or if not him, then whom?
Well, it certainly appears he's being groomed for that. I don't have any, formal inside knowledge that is the path they're taking. I mean, I didn't even make it to their camp this spring, unfortunately. But, it looks that way from the outside, and it looks like he's being groomed for that. I will say that, if you look around baseball, there are very few ex-players who are running front offices anymore. That used to be the norm in baseball. You'd get a sharp ex-player to be your GM, and nowadays it's all Ivy League educated, analytics-driven young people. And the smartest teams in baseball and the best teams in baseball, if you look around, the Dodgers, the Astros, the Cubs, the Yankees, those are the final four teams in baseball last October. They're all very analytics driven. And if I'm the Orioles, I jump on that bandwagon, man. I mean, it works. It clearly works. The smartest teams in baseball now are the best, and the best run, and the most efficiently run. And that's the way baseball is going now. That's not to say Brady Anderson can't do this. I like him a lot. I've known him a long time. I think he's a very sharp guy. I just think that is not a way that baseball is going right now.
He is Dave Schein, and you can follow him out at the Washington Post as well as on Twitter. Where you been? I mean, you didn't go to the Olympics, right? I mean, that's
right.
Kind of a weird thing for you. You're an Olympic veteran of many terms here. I'm a little shocked that you didn't show up on a mountain somewhere up there near the DMV. The DMC.
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you, this was probably a good one to miss if I'm going to miss one.
It looked cold.
It looked cold. There were a number of things. I mean, the threat of nuclear war, of course, is always a detriment. It just, it came down to baseball or Olympics, and they needed me on baseball, and I was fine with that. I went to Arizona for about 10 days at the beginning of spring training. I spent a lot of time around the Angels because I feel like we're all in on the Shohei Ohtani story. I can explain that to you in a minute. But then I went to Florida, spent about 10 days there. I was with the Nats for the first part of that, and then I floated around the state. If you want me to get into Ohtani, look, I sort of have this feeling that it's still gonna blow up. I mean, he's looked a little bit overwhelmed at times this spring, but there's a lot of factors going into that: a new culture, a new language, new league, learning his way around. I personally think that the Ohtani story is the best story in baseball right now, if he can handle doing both DHing 3 days a week and starting once a week on the mound. I'm going to go to Oakland for opening day to see him DH, and then he's going to start game 3 on the mound. I think it's fascinating because, how many times in baseball does something come along that is completely different and that has never been done, or at least hasn't been done in about 100 years?
Well, I think of Jim Abbott, right? Story. Like Jim Abbott was weird,
Jim
right?
Abbott.
Bo Jackson and Dion. That was a little weird, because that didn't happen.
Right.
But this is This is up
It's
there.
on that
I mean,
level.
pitchers becoming outfielders, the Mark Wohlers, and those are always kind of interesting to me too, or vice versa. But
no one does it full time. No one does
this
both.
is outrageous. I mean, and
It's outrageous.
I don't know how he won't be overwhelmed. And at what level, if you're a 260 hitter and you're a 4.4 ERA pitcher, you're a big leaguer, and you're better than anybody in Norfolk, and you're better than what they can do anywhere else. And given your relative value and what you're being paid to do, and the level at what you do it, but it was kind of like Deion Sanders and Bo Jackson to that degree, where they were so otherworldly at football, they were always judged that if they weren't otherworldly, look at Michael Jordan, right? And I guess with this guy, it's on both sides, because he might be a great hitter and a crappy pitcher, or vice versa at this level, or may struggle. But I mean, and more than that, Dave, the managerial decisions and how to execute what he does and play him and rest him, and coming in from a different culture, it's wild, man. It's wild.
It is. There's so many factors there. I mean, being in the American League is going to make it less of an issue about the strategy deploying him, because obviously he's only going to DH unless a case of an emergency, and he's only going to pitch once a week. There's not going to be any kind of double switching him in and out, or moving him from left field to pitch, or any kind of fun shenanigans like that. The one thing that Mike Scioscia did say while I was down there was that they will not hesitate to pinch run him, to pinch hit him. On certain occasions, he wouldn't be necessarily their top choice. You don't really want him running the bases if you can avoid it. But if they're going to have a shorthanded bench at some point, he's going to be a guy who could pinch run. Great athlete. I think it's a tremendous story, and I mean, I think he's going to be very good as a pitcher. I think the jury's still out somewhat on his hitting ability in the big leagues. But even as you said, if he hits 260. Hit 240, but hit 18 bombs. I mean, that's a good big league hitter. Draw some walks, and then on the mound, get out there 25 times and throw 150 innings and win you 12 games. I mean, I think it's an unprecedented thing. It hasn't been done since Babe Ruth. I mean, Babe freaking Ruth.
Well, the last badass thing that come out of Asia was, we thought it was Arabu, and then we thought it was Nomo, but what really was, Ichiro, right? Like, Ichiro was otherworldly and has, quite frankly, 2 decades later, still out playing, looking for a job, still as quirky as ever, loves baseball in some sort of religious kind of way, to really be honest. I don't know what else to compare it to in reading the stories, which have been incredible, and I've always loved Ichiro, so, we're all looking for the next thing. I mean, look, in New York, they keep anointing Judge and Sanchez, and they're looking for the next Mickey Mantle, right? We're looking for the next Cal Ripken here. We're looking for the next Ray Lewis here, right? I mean, everybody's looking for that next thing. He is this incredible cultural story that, unless you've seen baseball played on the other side of the water, by the way, speaking of the other side of the water, the Red Sox and the Yankees in London. How about that, Dave? You're going to draw that straw, aren't you? Right? You're going to get that one.
To draw that straw. Yeah.
But it's an amazing story, and I don't know that baseball unto itself this year isn't bigger and better, because the Cubs are, and the Dodgers are, and the Yankees are, and the Red Sox are. I mean, the big teams are still there. And the team that you cover down there in Washington, primarily, I mean, as much as we've had turnover with the manager in New York, the manager in Boston, you got a new manager in Washington as well. I was a Dusty guy. I think you were a Dusty guy as well. There's a lot of pressure when we're changing managers who already had a hell of a lot of success.
Well, I mean, it was kind of uncanny that, the Yankees, Nats, and Red Sox all changed managers coming off of postseason appearances. Actually, the Phillies changed managers too, and I know that Buck Showalter kind of made a crack about he's the last guy standing on I-95, but the Nats are. I tell you, man. I mean, I was in their camp for a few days, and they're as confident and as good as anybody. Dave Martinez, I was a Dusty guy. I was very skeptical of this move. I was skeptical of Dave Martinez, but, being around him for a few days, he has the camp feeling really loose in a way that, even under Dusty, who was a real player's manager, It didn't have this feel, and some of it's over the top, you know, but I think that's by design. He's just trying to keep everybody loose and happy, and there's a real good vibe in their camp, and they're as good as anybody in the National League. And that's not to say they're going to win it. They've had years where they've been the best team in the National League and flamed out in the first round. That could happen again. There's no telling, but they are loaded, man. They are absolutely loaded.
Where's World Series this year? Give me your early picks so I don't have to run out to Twitter and get them, Dave. Come on.
Well, I tell you, as loaded as the Nats are, they share a complex with the Houston Astros, and I was also around that team for a couple of days, and I'm blown away at how good they are. This was a team that won 100-plus games last year, and then, you know, are going to get a full year of Justin Verlander and Garrett Cole. I mean, I don't know that we've ever seen a team as good on paper as this one. And I'm going to have to go with Astros, and I'll go with Astros and Nats in the World Series. That's pure chalk. I mean, you know, I'm not exactly going out on a limb here, but I did spend time around those teams, and I could tell you that both of them look just about flawless.
All right, man. Well, rest up. It's a long season around here. Any hope for the Orioles on this comp thing? I mean, they're certainly a better team than they were a week ago, right? I mean, coming into opening day, they can win 85, 90 games, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, they can. That's not to say they will, but they can. And that second wild card, man, I tell you, it changes everything. You know, you saw a team like the Twins sneak in last year. That could be the Orioles. I mean, things have to break right, obviously, and they don't always happen that way. But this is a team that, you know, could be in the thick of it. I mean, they are a competitive team. They're in that same 82 to 88 win range with a lot of other teams. It won't be easy, but you can see a path to the playoffs for the Orioles.
Words of wisdom as we hang the bunting here for opening day. Stay warm during those April games up there. Work the coffee, and I'll be watching some hockey and getting ready for the season. Always great to visit with you, Dave. Take care, man. We'll see you soon.
Okay, Nestor. Take care, buddy.
Dave Scheinen, one of our favorites from the Washington Post, covering all things Major League Baseball. As we get you ready for opening day, we're at the NFL owners' meetings in Orlando. Full-time coverage out on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, anywhere palm trees, and hopefully some sandals go for a couple of days, including MIC, KEYMOU. A little Orlando for you. This portion of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at Cole Roofing. We all felt the March wind. We certainly felt the snow. Many of you north and west in the Hereford zone got hammered on Tuesday and Wednesday. Downtown, not so much, but either way, check your roof out. If you have a commercial roof space, you don't want the leak. You don't want to have happen what I had happen a couple of weeks ago. Don't let it goof on your roof. See Cole Roofing. They take care of these problems. King Discount Liquor's there for the national championship, for the opening day weekend, for Caps playoffs, lottery, beer, booze, and the best prices in Baltimore. Get on out, see my dear friend Paul King. Give the King a ring. Pulaski Highway and King Discount Liquors always with us. If you're up in the Abingdon area, they're getting Box Hill Pizzeria together. They're in a remodeling phase right now. Go to the website. You can see more out on the Instagram and Twitter and whatnot. But the best crab cakes in Arthur County still there. They even serve pizza at a pizzeria. Imagine that. But it's a crab cakeria. And they're expanding it out for the spring. So this thing's going to be done. If you've been up there to Box Hill, you know what I'm talking about. Go see them at boxhillpizzeria.com. And if you want to send somebody you like who doesn't live around here something nice, click on the website, send some crab cakes. You'll make a new friend. Trust me. Box Hill Pizzeria. I am Nestor. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. The buyatoyota.com audio vault is there for anything you miss while I'm down in Florida. You can check that out as well and download the TuneIn Radio app. You can listen live from anywhere in the world. Any breaking news before opening day happens first on the WNST Tech Service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard and Dennis Colatzos will be here on Thursday from 3 until 5, getting you ready. Opening day, national championship, Tiger Woods and the Masters 2 weeks away. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports. Welcome back. WNS tentacles of the UMBC story around from Charlotte. And I'll probably be chasing this one around for the next month, trying to find players and coaches and fallout. And you can find it all up in the buyatoyota.com audio vault. But this guy got a little bit of run at the Washington Post. I am a big fan of the Washington Post, always have been, and of course of the sports section. And I follow a lot of the ladies and gentlemen down there who cover sports on my Twitter feed. And lo and behold, Jerry Brewer is one of the columnists from the Washington Post who found himself immersed in the UMBC madness of the never-been-done-before 16 beating number 1. We welcome him in now from D.C. And on the eve of heading down to San Antonio to cover all things Final Four before the Natitude returns. Maybe I'll see you at a Cap Stanley Cup final game in 8 weeks, Jerry. I'm working on that. I got head coach Barry Trotz coming up here on Thursday night. We're going to swap for the bone marrow registry. But, man, you found yourself in the middle of one of those stories, right? Like, I was at the Caps game down on New York Avenue. My wife is streaming the game on New York Avenue as we're leaving the Caps game. I had no thought that a 16 was going to beat a 1. I wasn't on the plane to Charlotte, but you got yourself immersed in a pretty good story, pretty good memory, right?
It truly felt like it came out of nowhere. We're talking about a game that's tied at 21 at the half, and you're just like, oh, this is just going to be one of those bad 55-42, Virginia runs away at the end, boring kind of games. I remember turning to the people to my left and my right on press row and saying, this Charlotte pod, these 4 games that we've watched today have to be among the worst 4 games at any site of the NCAA tournament. And then that second half happens, and we watch history. And we had no idea at halftime that anything remotely close to history was going to happen.
I had a couple people hit me courtside, say, do you want me on the show or whatever? And, for me doing a Saturday thing, I was like, let's get through Sunday and see where it is. I want to reach to a bunch of you that were there, right? Like, this is being on press row when a no-hitter happens or when the earthquake happens in the upper deck at Candlestick Park or whatever, where the story the next morning, it blew me away as to how large the story was on morning news, on my Twitter, on my Facebook, not just because I have a closet full of UMBC stuff. I did not attend UMBC, but they have been, I've owned the station 20 years, Jerry. They've been the best collegiate partner we've had here. They've always been great with us, with soccer, with basketball, with lacrosse, with all their coaches. I've always just been a big fan of everything. And if you're ever on the campus, and I know you have a funny story coming from Dr. Rabowski on that, about what kind of a campus, what kind of a place it is, I found it fascinating because I missed a large swath of this, right? Like, I was in the club level of the Verizon Center, the Capital One Arena, at the beginning of the game, and the people in the suite were laughing at me because I'm like, well, it's UMBC, they're my team. I had my shirt on, underneath my cap stuff. I saw Trotz, and I get out on New York Avenue, and they're winning. And in the modern era, you don't have to pull over to a sports bar. You got the game on, but you're there courtside, and you were there for Virginia, right? Like, that was your dispatch was to go for the coronation of the number 1 team in the country that's in your reader base down in Charlottesville, right?
Right, exactly. And the fact that UMBC was there was just a cute side story. Oh, we get to tell it for a little bit, and we get to ask them how great it is to be there, and then you figure after the game, you'll try to get some perspective on them on how good Virginia is. But you never expected that was going to be the day. And then to see how it happened, to blow out Virginia by 20 points in that second half, for Jarius Lyles to be the best player on the floor, it just blew my mind.
Jerry, how many pods have you covered in your career? I mean, I know you come in from Seattle. You've been at the Post a couple of years. I'm not familiar with how many of these times you've been dispatched off to Boise. I've been doing this 27 years. Before that, I was a fan for 8 years working at the newspaper. And so I've been doing this 33 years. I think I've been to maybe 20 in my life, from the Omni in Atlanta in the 80s to Knoxville, Tennessee to chase Steve Francis with Maryland, to Oakland with Joe Smith 20 years ago. And they're all almost universally really, really sleepy, aren't they? Unless an upset's smelling, right? Like the Coppin thing 21 years ago up in Pittsburgh, everybody got into it. And I would think late into the night, a lot of the early people may not have stayed. And Virginia had its own little contingent of people down there. But when the crowd turns, that makes a whole different thing than your point of sitting there watching mostly awful basketball in a mostly empty arena for most of the day, right?
Right. I mean, you think about it, North Carolina played the second game of the day, so they were done playing by about 5 o'clock. And everyone who came to that night session, they were just there because they like basketball, because that's how the tickets go, that you need to buy like the whole section just so.
Yeah, what the hell else am I going to do tonight? Go out in Charlotte and get a steak? I came here for the basketball. I'll just, my team won. We'll sit around and watch the next games. I mean, I guess that's sort of what you do, right?
Yeah, you buy the whole session, and you're just kind of there, and you're watching, and you're having your concessions, and you're just kind of interested, but then you always feel that momentum when you start to feel, oh, the underdog has a chance. Oh, the underdog really has a chance. And then you start to, you're in ACC country in Charlotte, and everyone knows how good Virginia is. And then you look up, and with 10 minutes to go, they're ahead by double figures. And then the place just becomes electric. I mean, I can't remember how many of the 18 or 19,000 people were there, but 10 years from now, 81,000 people will tell you they were there and they saw it, and it was amazing. And then just to see, we're so used to the double-digit seed gets ahead by double figures, then the better team comes roaring back, and the double-digit seed has to win the game at the buzzer, or the favored seed misses a shot or makes a few plays, doesn't make a few plays in the last minute. This was completely different. I mean, with 5 minutes to go, it was over. I mean, it was just a party, and everybody in the stands they were trying to come to terms on everything that had happened, and just a mad celebration and appreciation. And I think there were cheers, and then there were plenty of people texting their friends, trying to tell them, you guys need to turn it on the TV right now. This is going to happen. This thing that we thought would never happen. This thing that over 34 NCAA tournaments since they went to a field of at least 64, 0 and 135. The one is about to happen. And the way that it happened is still shocks me more than anything. I knew eventually a 16 would beat a 1. I had no idea that it was going to be that game, and I had no idea that it was going to be that emphatic of a victory in the second half.
In all of your days of covering sports, you've been at big events. I've been at Super Bowls that are Super Bowls, and some are more memorable than others. And obviously, we've had our own local parades and stuff. But, I try to think about times I've lucked into being in the right place at the right time when something has happened. I walked out of a no-hitter one time because I had a plane to catch in San Diego, so I still have never seen a no-hitter. But, I walked into Elway's Drive game in Cleveland as a fan back in 1986. That 30 years later you still talk about it. I would think that game there and the way it will stand the test of time, in that maybe a 16 will beat a 1 again, maybe. But if that happens, it's going to be some buzzer beater, 51-49. It's not going to be a laugher in that fashion. And you find yourself there, and I guess Jerry. By the way, Jerry Brewer is joining us here from the Washington Post. You can certainly follow him out at the Washington Post as well as at Jerry Brewer. And more than that, out on Twitter, he was courtside in Charlotte, so you drew the straw on this one. But from the journalist in you, at a story like this, everybody watched the game, or they can look at the box score and see that Lyles hit some shots and the kid from Wisconsin. But then you wake up the next day and it felt like everybody wanted to know what a retriever was and what is UMCB and BCMB. And I saw people pooping on the university out on Twitter about the academics and stuff. And I mean, I've been here a long time. Like UMBC, sort of the nerd, science computer school that I couldn't have gotten into, Jer. So it always has been a little bit above my SAT grade, and I've gone over there and watched sports forever, but it's a really cool place, and the story of Freeman Hrabosky, I guess, comes to you. At what point did it become more than a basketball story for you as a reporter that said, man, I'm going to go in another direction with this if I'm the president of the university? Or does somebody pull you on a sleeve and say, you should go meet that guy?
I think I had plenty of people texting me in the hours afterwards saying, it would be a good idea if you talk to Freeman. And, and I had forgotten his story. I mean, what an amazing human being, number one, but also a character. The way that he speaks and just the diversity of interest that he has, his backstory, and it was an amazing thing. And I think once you get done with the basketball part of it, once you get off deadline and you feel like you've lived up to the moment, okay, now this now is the story of the NCAA tournament. What more can I tell? And I think the first question people had is, what the heck is UMBC? Most people didn't know what the acronym stands for. They don't know where it is. They don't know even about, the stellar academics, all of that. And you're just trying to figure out, how do I tie this together? And I thought for me, the best thing to do is talk to the president and go from there. And all of a sudden, this goes from being just another NCAA tournament, which I've covered most of them for the past 20 years, going back to college, to it becomes like this is kind of just a really cool story of a novelty.
And so some guy from Baltimore is going to call me next week and put me on the show and ask me about it.
Yeah, exactly. And we went, the Post went, Dave Sheinin went out, and since he lives close to UMBC, lives in Baltimore, he went to the campus, and he tried to figure out a way to tell their story. And then I'm trying to tell their story from Charlotte. We had a news side reporter also roped in trying to tell the story. So it was a matter of just like what for me as an opinion writer, as a guy who has to share some kind of perspective beyond the news, what's the best way for me to get at it? And it was an honor to be able to talk to Freeman Hrabosky and to share a piece of that story and a new chapter. If you wrote a book about him, it should be 700 pages. And maybe I got to write my one small chapter in that 700-page extravagant book of his.
Well, the other part of it's Lyle's connection to him, right? And that I knew about, and Ryan Odom's connection to Dave Odom. And look, I had Feinstein on last week. Feinstein's been courtside all year long. Only really did it as a favor to Ryan Odom because he was there when Ryan Odom was born, like literally. So, this story takes on a life of its own, and I guess for Ryan Odom, for the university, I don't know if you know, but there's a beautiful new gym they opened 5 weeks ago, opened it day before Super Bowl, that we went down to, and they hosted playoff games over there because of the conference they're in the America East, where the host teams are the higher seeds, and it's just kind of neat all the way around. And I walked into that building. First thing I said, John Mayer's going to play here one day. It's a big old building, not like the humble little rack that we're used to over there. But it's a transition time for the program, for the university. But also, we know how this goes. Ryan Odom's going to get his shoulder tapped on by, some big school with a big check. I mean, that's the way this goes, right? And then the university has to figure out, whether this is a Chaminade one and done, or whether they're going to build something on the southwest side of town, which obviously they now have an opportunity to do, unlike you could ever possibly have being on the platform they were on over the weekend.
Yeah, and they've been proactive in doing what they can to entice Ryan Odom to stay, trying to enhance his contract. One of the reasons that you're able to recruit a coach of his caliber was you were building this arena. Now it's been built. You invested $85 to $90 million in this. It's only right that you continue to help this program grow. Now, the question, there are going to be some things eventually presented to Odom that are just too good to pass up. The question is it now during this coaching carousel, or can you push it down the road? If they can push it a year or even 2 years down the road, where the program would be just amazing. And then all of a sudden, maybe you're in a good rhythm and you can become, even though you might become a stepping stone place for college basketball coaches, you can get in a nice, good routine. And maybe all of a sudden you are one of those programs that, it's no surprise to us when we see Davidson make the field anymore. It's no surprise when you see maybe Fairleigh Dickinson or LIU Brooklyn, all of these types of programs. Maybe you could be one of those programs that makes the tournament in a decade, let's say 4 or 5 times. And maybe once a decade you have an opportunity to advance. And maybe you get to the point in which when you make it, you're not a 16 seed. Maybe you're graduating, you're a 14, and then maybe you're one of those teams that could get a 12 and have a much greater chance of being able to get out of the first round again. I could see that. I mean, I think when you look at the academic profile of the university, when you look at the just the innovative people that they have, it's possible. It's not going to be easy, but it's possible. And
well, they've already got a rivalry with Vermont now, right? I mean, beating them the way they beat them up there after the way they had it shoved down their throat for a dozen years. At least there's a little fire started for something that feels like a big game for UMBC, that when Vermont comes in next year, they'll fill the place up just, on reputation, because people want to come out and see the circus, right?
Right, exactly. And you look at Vermont. Vermont is a very good program at that level. Why can't you get to that level, especially and stay there consistently, especially where you're based? The amount of recruiting options that you have. We know that the top of the line, they're going to look at Maryland and Georgetown, and Villanova is going to come in there, but when you look at D.C., Baltimore, let's put them together, there's so much talent through there. And if you can find some of the guys who maybe slip through the cracks, or some of the guys who are maybe looking more for a different kind of college experience, I could see you. There are four kids from Maryland on that roster right now. I could see that becoming, half as many people. Maybe there's 6 from the region, and you sort of can build your program that way.
He is Jerry Brewer. He's at the Washington Post. This portion of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at Howard Bank, a relentless commitment to being the best at everything they do. They are presenting our community and charity series, which begins on April 5th. That's a Thursday. We'll be hearing more about that. Cole Roofing also involved in our community and charity series, as well as our swabbing with head coach Barry Trotz of the Washington Capitals on Thursday night. We'll be at Michael's Cafe in Timonium, having this split-level soup, having those delicious crab cakes and a prime steak. I might knock back a Malbec with my wife as well. Come on out, meet us after the Orioles game on Thursday night. It'll be all things puck as we get ready for the Stanley Cup playoffs. This guy knows about that down at the Washington Post, and also the Nationals and the Capitals, the Wizards. You're going to be on your toes in April and May. You got plenty going on down there outside of the Redskins fiascos, right?
Absolutely, and I look forward to it. I mean, it should be a very interesting spring, especially with the NBA and NHL, and the Nats might be a little bit of a kind of a slow cooking thing, but I think that's going to be good for them to not just jump out of the gates and have something to grind through this year.
Well, it kind of helps when everybody else in the division stinks, right? That helps.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, we'll see what's left of that once great Mets pitching staff. I mean, they could at least chase them for a while, but clearly the Nats, if they don't win the division, it would be a shock.
Hey, man, always a pleasure to visit with you. Congratulations on being in the right place at the right time with the right story that has led me to you once again, Jerry. A good memory for you down there in Charlotte, and certainly for everybody up here. It was a fun little magic carpet ride over the weekend, and we'll all lament how they couldn't hit any threes against Kansas State. But that's for another day. As John Eisenberg pointed out here earlier in the week, no one will remember they lost to Kansas State. They're only going to remember that they beat Virginia. So
exactly.
I thought that was good perspective on it. Jerry, we'll see you further up the road, man. Appreciate you.
All right, take care, man.
You got it. Jerry Brewer joining us here from the Washington Post. You can find him out on Twitter as well as at Jerry Brewer. That's JerryBrewer. Kind of like Bernie Brewer. I don't think they're related, but that was my favorite Brewer. It wasn't Shonda Brewer, who was my dear friend. It was Bernie Brewer, except for 82. Didn't like it very much, 82. That was a whole Harvey Wallbanger thing. Oh, I'm wearing my Oriole throwback stuff, so I had to start talking about baseball like life is the back of a baseball card. Opening day this week, we're at the NFL owners' meetings in Orlando, Florida, all week long. We'll hear from John Harbaugh as well this week in the breakfasts with all the coaches, so it'll be a big week around here as we get ready for opening day. We have head coach Barry Trotz on Thursday night. Come on out, get swabbed. Join us for the Bone Marrow Registry, the opening day after party, if you will, at Michael's Cafe in Timonium. Anything you miss, you can find out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. And, of course, the morning newspaper. We deliver that every morning free of charge. We're changing it soon. We're going to give it a little facelift coming up in April. You get that every morning. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life, guaranteed. Also have the Maryland Jockey Club entries in there for you each and every day. We are being sponsored by Laurel and Pimlico and the Pink Day and the Preakness and the Bottomless Cup and the Rock and Roll and all that good stuff you'll be hearing about in the coming weeks. But if you want the entries to Laurel for the weekend, you can find them out at the front page at WNST.net as well as in our morning newspaper. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Taos, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.